to this Tuesday edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. And joining me today, we have our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera. We have our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendiz, are going to join us in just a moment to talk a little bit about a lot of things, really, that are happening across the border right now. But first, we wanted to start with one story that's making headlines today. And as we mentioned last week, thousands of U.S. troops are on the border as part of President Donald Trump's emergency border declaration. We've learned that more are on the way. This is some video that was taken of the current deployments. Now, troop deployments have tripled to 7,600 troops and include every branch of the U.S. military now. Since April, large areas of the border have been designated militarized zones, including right here in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. This is something we spoke about yesterday with our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez. There was about 3 or 4 of those signs up letting folks know that this is now a militarized zone belonging to Joint Base San Antonio. Now, the zones allow U.S. troops to apprehend immigrants and others accused of trespassing on border areas that are now military bases. In Nogales, Army troops are patrolling the border in full battle gear, helmets, M4 service rifle, bulletproof vests in high-traffic areas for illegal crossings, and the troops are using striker vehicles in the rugged terrain. Take a listen to what this Army Lieutenant Colonel had to say about those vehicles.
However, you'll see that there are no machine guns or anti-tank missiles while we're down here supporting Border Patrol. So here in Nogales, we're using these vehicles almost exclusively for their cameras, as well as their ability, you can see they look fairly rugged and high off the ground, to traverse some rugged terrain that sometimes Border Patrol's pickup trucks aren't able to.
Now, on Friday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered another 3,000 active duty troops to the southern U.S. border. That would bring the total number to over 10,000 troops here in the area. They'll also be equipped with the 20-ton armored Stryker combat vehicles that you just heard that Lieutenant Colonel talking about. The soldiers are primarily from the 4th Infantry Division's 2nd Stryker Brigade Combat Team at Fort Carson, Colorado. And like I said, I'm going to bring in Julian, but first let's bring in our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera. Sal, one of the things, we're seeing these troop numbers increase across the border. We've got another, I think it was 3,000 coming later this week, potentially. Yet we're seeing a decline in the number of illegal crossings. How are things looking over there in San Diego?
Well, no images like we just saw, no military. We know they're out here somewhere. We know the Marines are here. We know the National Guard is here. But we don't have any of these military zones along the border. Perhaps it's because we have no military installations near the border that could be expanded to increase its territory all the way to the physical border with Mexico. But no scenes like this. We don't have helicopters landing. We don't have troops deploying. We do know they're here, as we stated. Why they're here, why they're being deployed to the border. Perhaps it's a show of force, a physical, visual deterrent. Perhaps they want to maintain this impression that the border is still being overrun, that we are being invaded by this force from the south. Don't know why they are continuing to send the military to the border, but perhaps it's part of the reason the numbers are way down. We have seen numbers that we have not seen ever. I remember a year ago, 2 years ago, those of us covering the border to what's going on now, it is just absolutely mind-boggling. Nothing is really happening here in this sector, and I would imagine in other sectors. There you see the numbers. These are for the month of June, the latest that have been officially released by Customs and Border Protection. San Diego had 895 encounters for the month of June. That's down 96.5%. Think about that. 895 arrests when you consider that there are about 2,200 Border Patrol agents in the San Diego sector. So each agent is making less than half of an arrest right now. And we're told that apprehensions and encounters for the month of July will also be way down. El Paso, 1,630, down 88%. The Rio Grande Valley, 981 encounters. That is down 83%. So, Rudy, numbers way down. Military is still in the area. But again, perhaps this is all part of the solution, part of what is going on, because we, compared to what we were seeing a year ago, 2 years ago, this is just unheard of. Now, keep in mind, and there's a point that I want to make, and it's not a very popular one. When we did see these huge numbers of people coming to the border, we call them illegal, unlawful. But in reality, they labeled themselves as asylum seekers. So when you think about it that way, they were not breaking the law. They were not here illegally. They were doing their legal part to seek asylum, something that was allowed by U.S. law. Controversial, yes, but perhaps, as we were calling it, illegal, not quite. Julian, you wanted to jump into this discussion?
Absolutely, Sal. First of all, you're completely correct when you say that, why the need of the military vehicles when numbers are way down. So it's all about optics. It's a show of force, not so much against the migrants. Migrants already know what they're getting into, that they're afraid of, know what could happen to them crossing the border. It's mostly a message to the cartels that facilitate the travel and actually tell the migrants where to cross. A migrant who just arrived from Central America to the border doesn't know exactly which part of the desert, how far away from the singing cactus he has to cross the border. The cartels are the ones doing all the movement. And these vehicles are a message to the cartels. I've been on the Mexican side of the border. And let me tell you, those strikers look gigantic from the Mexican side because they're on top of a hill. So down to Mexico, they send a very strong message. Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents worth on the asylum. Asylum is a lawful process in the U.S. It provides political asylum to those persecuted for their political views, perhaps gender identity, and nationality, religion. But just to clarify, when anybody, including U.S. citizens like you and me, cross between ports of entry, we're doing so illegally. That's a federal offense to the statute. Obviously, once you are on the U.S. side after crossing illegally, you can claim asylum, and then you are giving a paper that sort of legalizes your stay until the next court venue. I also wanted to throw in some numbers. First of all, El Paso has the highest migrant traffic in the country, in the southwest border, almost twice as much as the next highest. And I just got a report from the New Mexico U.S. Attorney's Office. And a lot of that traffic is coming through New Mexico. Of course, the migrants, the cartels operate in Juarez, but the whole area is permeated by law enforcement, Border Patrol, CBP helicopters, even Texas State National Guard. So the cartels bring you through New Mexico, which is right across the state line from El Paso, Texas. And that's where the military vehicles presence is mostly felt.
With these numbers down so low, and this is a question for both of you, let's start with Salvador and San Diego. I know you both have your thumbs on the pulse of nonprofits and non-governmental organizations that work with migrants. What are those groups in San Diego kind of saying about these numbers being so low, Sal?
Well, if they talk to you, they will tell you that they are still very much in business helping those that need their services. When you ask about perhaps, well, you're not doing as much as you once did, how are you spending the money that you're still receiving from the government or from other sources, they will say that they are simply doing what they were doing from the beginning, ever before we start seeing this gigantic number. So they will tell you for them it's business as usual, people who need their help, their services, that they are there for them right now. That is the company line. Obviously, I would imagine they're not doing very much. We know that a lot of people have been laid off. A lot of volunteers are no longer needed. So that is a big impact on what's going on with the NGOs, the nonprofits that were helping the migrants on this side of the border.
And Julian, have you been in contact with anybody in your area of responsibility? I know it's not just El Paso, but you go into New Mexico as well for your coverage. Anything there, any thoughts, anything that they're saying to you?
I also go to Arizona. I also cover part of Arizona. Absolutely. Two things, Rudy. Number one, when you ask how they see this militarization, they're just appalled by it. Why is it necessary to have soldiers to process civilians or to stop civilians? So they're really concerned about the possible interaction between the soldiers and the migrants. course, the cartel just sends you over and then right back to Mexico. So it's not really interaction with much of the cartel. So yeah, they don't like it. Now, as far as what they're doing, I think from some conversations, their work right now is more important than ever because of all the funding that they've lost, all the obstacles that they're facing in getting to clients, their contribution, their outreach to those in detention, to inform them of their rights, to avail them with legal services. I would say hearing from them is more important than ever.
Yeah, now you both mentioned something real quick before we go to break that's so important, and you both mentioned funding there. I think it's important to realize a lot of times these nonprofits are kind of shelling out of their own budgets and getting kind of reimbursed. Is that typically how it works? They get reimbursed by the federal government?
Or they have grant writers and they acquire grants from the federal government. Another source, the state of California is also big here as far as providing funding for agencies that do help with migrants. The county of San Diego has a lot of funds for legal services for migrants. Now we're hearing that they're doing all kinds of stuff. They're providing workshops for small business owners to make sure that they know they're up to speed on their rights, what to do in case of an ICE raid, how to educate their employees about immigration issues. So that is money that comes from taxpayers. Here in California, perhaps we do more than in states such as Arizona or Texas, but definitely the government does contribute a lot of money towards its agencies to help migrants and services for migrants.
Yes, we're seeing a federal government money kind of evaporate as we speak, but the nonprofits also work with local donations. And along the border, these are deep blue communities, so they're still in the fight with much less resources, and that's where the vocation to serve comes in. You got into the nonprofit because you wanted to help, not because you wanted to get rich. So they're still in the fight.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. If you could both stick around, we're going to continue the conversation. I know, Julian, you have some new reporting on 2 Americans who were recently killed in Mexico. We're going to take that after the break. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this Tuesday edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy, and I'm Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. And joining me to my left there is our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendiz. Julian, a very troubling story. 2 Americans killed in Mexico. Fill us in.
The official discourse I always hear from officials south of the border is that, yeah, there's violence. There's very ugly violence, a lot of atrocities committed, but it's mostly gang on gang, criminal on criminal. Well, this month we've had a couple of instances in which people we can say are innocent civilians from the United States nonetheless got caught up with in this cartel violence. First, we had the case of a young man from Presidio, Texas, who was across the border in one of the tourist areas of the Mexican town there called Ojinaga, Mexico. And all of a sudden, there's this cartel confrontation, and a stray bullet, what appears to be a stray bullet, ended the life of this young man named Alan Valenzuela. I heard from the Presidio County Sheriff's Office how appalled they were by this event and how they're expecting to see what's done about this as far as justice in Mexico. Days after this happened, I heard from the Chihuahua Public Safety Director. He spoke about the arrest of between 3 and 6 members of a cell of the Sinaloa cartel. And there's a lot of violence in this community of Ojinaga, across from Presidio, Texas, because it is a place where drugs and migrants typically are crossed. So the Sinaloa cartel, as it's fracturing, and we will address the fracturing of the Sinaloa cartel a little later. As it's fracturing, it is perceived as losing force. So other groups like the Juarez cartel, now called La Línea, are moving in. And this has led to several confrontations, a lot of people dead, mostly, according to Mexican authorities, criminals. But in this case, we had the regrettable loss of this young man. Now, a few miles here, just across the border from El Paso and Juarez, we also had the discovery. You see the images there of a home in Western Juarez, where the police recently dug up the body of a young woman aged between 15 and 20. They weren't sure at the time. They had no identity. In recent days, we have learned from the Chihuahua State Attorney General's office that this woman very likely is a U.S. citizen, a U.S. Young teenager from originally from New Mexico, who was residing in Juarez for whatever reason. And this is the troubling part and where the cartel comes in. I am told that this victim was apparently kidnapped for profit. And I spoke to the public safety director, and we have a soundbite there. I don't know if it's available. Anyway, he was saying that the cartels, ever since the migrant surge kind of waned, they're looking for alternate profits. They used to make a killing, so excuse the pun, sorry. They used to make a lot of money from kidnapping migrants and holding them for ransom, even after the migrants had paid money to be brought to the border and sent across. So now that there's no migrants, what the Chihuahua authorities are saying, they're troubled because the cartels are now kidnapping ordinary people. They tell me that like this, perhaps like this young woman from New Mexico. They tell me that they're dedicating a lot of resources to solve the problem, and that in July, after having several instances in May and June, in July they did not have a single instance until this unfortunate finding. So that's the situation. Cartels moving on, adjusting from migrants to ordinary residents.
And just to kind of backtrack a moment there, Julian, you said this was when was the last time they had heard of a kidnapping of a non-migrant individual in this kind of capacity for ransom money?
We had a spike with at least 6 to 7 instances between May and June. Prior to that, it was rare. They may have occasionally one in any given month, but there was a definite spike. And the authorities are attributing it to the cartels just targeting regular people.
And when you say regular people, I mean, if this person, this young woman, you said she was a U.S. citizen but residing over the border, is that kind of, is there any warning for folks that maybe, live over there for the cost of living situation and come back over here to work?
Yeah, and we have reported this numerous times in the past. While the discourse is, if you have nothing to fear, if you're not involved in crimes, if you're not here coming over the border to buy drugs or do something bad, you should be okay. These instances show that there could always be a stray bullet. You could always be targeted because of a perception of who you are or that your family might have money. There's still a lot of details we don't know on this latter case involving the teenager, but the message is clear. It is happening at least to other people, and you never know.
You bring up the stray bullet, and I wanted to bring Salvador in here for this next part as we continue this conversation on Americans being killed in Mexico. A couple years ago, just over the border from Brownsville in Matamoros, we had I believe they were some tourists from South Carolina. They were medical tourists visiting Matamoros for some cosmetic surgery to get it done cheaper than they would here in the United States. And they, in fact, got caught in the crossfire. There was some miscommunication between cartel members and these Americans. One was killed, the others were kidnapped and then and shot and released. And then come to find out, they had no relationship to the cartel, and the cartel just kind of messed up. And if I'm not mistaken, the cartel actually turned over the individuals that were involved in that. But is that I know last year's Salvador, you were reporting on something similar, but a little bit different out in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, it happened a little more than a year ago. There were two brothers from Australia and their good friend from San Diego. They had gone down to Baja for a surfing safari. And they went down to a beach and they encountered a couple of men and they were shot and killed. And apparently what happened is they were victims of extortion. The two suspects are members of the Sinaloa cartel. And as you know, members of these groups have to make money for their bosses, and they resort to kidnappings, robberies, extortion. And that's what they were trying to do with the brothers from Arizona, the two men in the left, and then the gentleman with the white T-shirt, that is Jack Jack Carter Road from San Diego. The Robinson brothers were down here. They were surfing, and they were killed. So that is happens a lot down here. People find themselves in the wrong spot at the wrong time. There you see the well where their bodies were recovered. Tragic story that happened in Baja California a little more than a year ago. A couple years ago, we also heard of an elderly couple from San Diego who was down there at their home camping, and they were approached by someone, and they were victims of a robbery. They were shot and killed as well. And ironically, their bodies were dumped in another well. This happens quite a bit here in the border region. It's scary to think about it, but it does happen. It's an occurrence that takes place here in Baja as tourists venture down there to go, have a good time, and they become victims of crime.
All right, and we're going to continue this conversation after the break. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Good afternoon and welcome back to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and joining me are our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendiz, and our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera. And gentlemen, one of the things we've been seeing in the headlines a lot lately is different leaders of cartels in Mexico being arrested. Does that have any relation to kind of those spikes in kidnappings that we're seeing now?
I would say yes, definitely. As somebody's perceived to be weak or perhaps losing its power, these guys smell the blood and they go after it, and they try to gain power, gain influence, and make a lot of money. And that's what it's about. So when you perceive somebody to be weak, it's survival of the fittest, and they go after them. And that is perhaps what is happening with the Sinaloa cartel, as their leadership is being arrested and perhaps being extradited. Others are trying to move in. We are hearing that the Sinaloa cartel, this is according to Mexico's Secretary of Defense, that the Sinaloa cartel is losing a lot of territories where they were bringing or manufacturing the drugs. We've also heard that they've lost all access to the Mexico south border with Guatemala. So that is saying a lot, because the Sinaloa cartel, under its infamous leader, Chapo Guzman, was perhaps one of the most powerful ever in Mexico, and then it started to dwindle, and perhaps not on the brink of extinction, but it's certainly its influence, its power is certainly diminishing by the day almost. Wouldn't you say that, Julian?
Rudy, Sal, I've been covering organized crime on the border since I was a young man out of UT El Paso, and I was 22 years old. And what I've always seen is that, there you will always have a new government come in. You will always have the old leaders arrested, and then a couple of years later, they're replaced by new leaders. And this has not changed in 30, 35 years because our appetite for drugs in the U.S. has not diminished, and the corruption south of the border has not diminished. It has gotten more underwater, under the public eye, but it's still there because we have a very, very lengthy list of known, recognized criminal leaders who are still out there. Sure, Chapo's gone. A couple of his sons are gone. Ismael Mayo Zambada is gone. But still, the drugs are coming in. Fentanyl is down. Fentanyl seizures are down on the border.
And that's what I was going to ask, because they've lost the southern border of Mexico to import different things. Does that mean fentanyl's coming down as well?
The Mexican border is very wide. The southern border with Guatemala is very wide. If you lose control of the town of Ciudad Hidalgo, for instance, Tapachula, etc., you can operate from across the border in Guatemala. You can operate from Costa Rica and still import your product. I know that the Sinaloa cartel still has a very strong presence in South America and alliances with the organized criminal groups over there. And that's part of the reason why we have been seeing a tremendous increase in cocaine seizures and also cocaine use in the U.S. lately. So it's like a hydra. You may chop off a head, another two will grow back.
Yeah, I think when we were talking before the program started, Julian, you had mentioned it's we've seen this movie before.
We have seen this movie play out before, and we know the outcome. And when the movie's over, the same movie is going to play again.
Yeah, very interesting, too, that you mentioned the appetite for drugs has only increased here in America. I believe it was 2 years ago when President AMLO had actually mentioned that part of the problem is Americans, demand for more drugs. And he gave some reasons as to why he thought was the issue and the driver behind that. But nonetheless, those numbers keep going up. People keep using, and someone's got to supply it, and it sounds like it's going to be the cartel. Very eye-opening conversation. Thank you both so much. Julian Resendiz, our El Paso correspondent, Salvador Rivera, our San Diego correspondent. Appreciate you all both so much for being here, and we appreciate you being here for this episode of Border Report Live. If you'd like to see Salvador, Julian, or our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez's reporting, you can go to borderreport.com for more. That's where you can also see every new episode of Border Report Live. That's all at borderreport.com. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.